Abrego Garcia, who is being held right now in El Salvador. This case has gotten a lot of attention. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And I'm not even going to repeat what he's being accused of because I don't actually want to repeat the unfounded propaganda. But what I thought was really interesting is that MSNBC or NBC, Meet the Press, and Fox News, because I do this show where we watch the Sunday morning news shows, both of those shows did the same thing where they showed a clip of a woman whose daughter was killed by someone undocumented. I'm going to show the NBC version of this instead of the Fox one, but literally they showed the same clip and they ask the same question. So this is Chris Van Holland from Maryland who visited Garcia Abrego, and see how Kristen Welker of Meet the Press, NBC, responds to his discussion about having visited this person.
You know, the other thing that we witnessed at the White House this week, Patty Morin, the mother of Rachel Morin, who is a Maryland woman who was murdered by an undocumented immigrant, you're very familiar with this, was at the White House, and she did speak from the White House briefing room. I want to play you a little bit of what she had to say and get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
To have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter?
And this, of course, relates to the use of anecdote, which is something that you write about in your book, the selective curation of anecdote being an essential mechanism of propaganda. But can you talk about why it is that you have both NBC, it's not as shocking with Fox News, but why is NBC basically doing propaganda and PR for the Trump administration? And how could they possibly show this clip, which has absolutely nothing to do with this case?
It's unconscionable. It's disgusting. It's depraved because they know exactly what the Trump administration is using this for. And it's not just the selective curation of anecdote. I have a section in the book where I use examples mainly from NPR and New York Times and a few other, outlets that are considered to be liberal. The Atlantic.
Right.
It's the way that the emotional suffering and when you see someone who's lost a child,
so many
your heart goes out to them.
Of course.
I mean, nobody should suffer that ever, and nobody wants to watch somebody suffer that. It's horrific, and I got into this work because I want a world with less violence, and that's why I'm so passionate about these issues, because the policies we're pursuing, if police prosecution and prisons made our society safer, we would have the safest society in the history of the world. We're spending more money on those things than anybody ever. Those things do not make us safer. That's why I do this work. I care about violence and harm and trauma. And what's going on here is somebody's grief and trauma is being weaponized to create a system where more people will lose their children, where more mothers will have a child die, be separated from them, not just in the United States, but globally. And that's what's so tragic here. And it's so disgusting about NBC's weaponization of this. But I also want to say something about NBC. You have a responsibility to not use this one person's grief to essentially randomly say that a different person unrelated to the case who happens to be the same race or ethnicity as that person should spend the rest of their life in a torture chamber in El Salvador's terrorism prison. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I do think you didn't want to bring up the facts underlying Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, but I just want to say, I meant
the allegations, but please go ahead, because whatever you present will be very thoughtful and thorough. Yeah.
The allegations against him they stemmed from an allegedly corrupt cop that the state's attorney put on a list of people that they wouldn't rely on. And I believe he was outside Home Depot years ago with people he didn't even know looking for work, and was arrested and never convicted of anything at all. And it's that little interaction. And the reason it relates here is the media is constantly printing the things that police say,
Right.
without questioning whether they're true. And so many people's faces and mugshots and stories are in the news after like their arrest or something, and the facts that are alleged against them end up never being proven whatsoever. And this takes that sort of thing I talk about a little bit in the book about the media kind of weaponizing narratives of police. It takes it to like the very, very last logical step, which is that years later, somebody can be ripped away from their family and deported and sent to a torture chamber indefinitely because there's no laws. I mean, he's not there pursuant to any law. He could be detained as long as El Salvador. I mean, he could be detained for 50 years. And all of that is happening because on one day, a cop who has been found to have at least alleged other credibility violations or concerns by the state attorney, because that officer made some allegation in the police report about him that has never been proven in a court. And that's very scary.
Yeah. It's also scary. This is a different point, but when people think that they're like experts in law, you have a lot of people being like, well, he's not a citizen, kind of shifting to the Mahmoud Khalil argument. He's not a citizen, so he doesn't have First Amendment protections. Like, people just pick up these talking points that are actually not based in fact, which is another phenomenon. If we had a society that actually cared about keeping people safe, keeping people alive, what would this society be investing in? And what would they be covering? What stories would our media be covering?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite parts of the book is I sort of talk about the concept of what is news and what the news could look like. And I've been working with news outlets across the country to expand their connection to a wide range of other sources. Like, for example, the police spend billions of dollars in public relations. You know, like the Chicago police, when they killed Laquan McDonald, had 4 full-time PR officials. Now they have over 50. You know, the LA sheriff has over 42 full-time PR officials, according to the LA Times investigation. Another 27 for the LAPD. I mean, NYPD has over 80. I mean, but the schools don't have, you know, and teachers unions and the school department, and people who are testing the water and the soil, people who are doing OSHA violations, child labor investigation, wage theft stuff. All of these entities that are learning really important information about our health, well-being, and safety don't have the public relations apparatus, right? And so they are not able to get those things into the news. But if the news were much more oriented toward the kinds of things that affect our health and well-being, so the things that kill the most people, the things that cause the most death and injury and illness, the things that affect people's health and well-being the most, it would be covering things like access to healthcare and the crimes of the powerful and wealthy, and air pollution and water pollution and public corruption and
Worst
tax
Landlord.
evasion.
That's you have that idea for a TV show called Worst Landlord, right? This week, or
Yeah,
the worst Landlord of the week or something.
Yeah, the news could station a reporter in housing court and just have a bad landlord of the week or bad landlord of the day segment, and people would watch that, you know, because like, you know, there was just a fire in New York City that killed people in a place where the landlord didn't have working smoke detectors. And that is a horrific tragedy. And that happens all over the country, in every single city, every single day. There are things like that happening. And the news media is not covering it with the same level of urgency for a variety of reasons. And you can have all kinds of comebacks and arguments, counter arguments, and I address a lot of them in the book. But the fact remains that the things that we are made to be afraid of and the solutions that we have to those things are actually not correlated with the empirical evidence of the kinds of things that are harming our health, well-being, and safety and costing us our lives. And that distortion, that gap, is Copaganda. And that gap is responsible for many people in our society not treating some of the most urgent issues of our time with the same level of urgency that they treat shoplifting. And that is a real scandal.